Hi everyone, this is Sudha and welcome to Spiritual Journey, an ongoing conversation about spirituality and how to live the spiritual life, how to awaken the spiritual heart, and how to experience spiritual freedom. So today, I would like to continue our conversation about practice. And in the yoga tradition, which is my primary tradition, there is a book called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Patanjali is considered to be the father of yoga. He didn't create it, but he did write it down. Prior to his time and even during his time, the practices and the wisdom of yoga were something that were exchanged from a teacher or a guru to a student, and it was largely done in secret. So most oftentimes, other people didn't know what you were being taught. It was something that you kept private and that you practiced privately. And it was something that was brought down through a lineage. So generation after generation after generation, based on a tried and true understanding of what these spiritual practices that are held within the yoga tradition could provide to the serious practitioner. So Patanjali was potentially the first or the earliest individual to take some of this knowledge and write it down into a book format. And that book is called the Yoga Sutras. It is a collection of short aphorisms, short statements, that the book is typically divided into 4 parts. The first part gives you a definition of yoga. The second part tells you about the practice of yoga. And the third part talks about obstacles, and then the fourth part talks about the benefits and the experience of liberation, which is the ultimate goal of the practice of yoga: spiritual liberation, personal liberation, physical liberation, any type of liberation. So within this book, at the second chapter, the very first sutra there, it says, Tapaha Svadhyaya Ishwara Pranadhanani. And this sutra, which is in Sanskrit, tells us that there are these 3 practices. One is self-study. One is discipline, and one is devotion. And that together, these 3 create action, spiritual action, and spiritual practice. So let's take a look at kind of the broad spectrum of spiritual practices. We might consider our physical asana practice a spiritual practice. We might consider meditation, chanting, prayer, going to church or temple. We might consider observation of rituals or holidays that have a spiritual or religious, influence surrounding them. We might consider these spiritual practices. In the yoga tradition, they make it a point to say that it's not just showing up, it's how you show up. It's the fact that you show up with a certain type of intention, a certain type of attitude, a certain type of mindset and heart set. And that intention, that way of showing up is based in faith. It's based in curiosity. It's based in an intention to better oneself, to experience some level of freedom, a reduction in suffering, an increase in joy, a simple kind of joy, which we could call spiritual joy. And so the way that we show up to our practice is actually more important than the practice that we're doing. So if we show up to meditation and we're bored and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to force myself to sit here for the next 30 minutes, and then we're not even attempting to find out what lies beyond the suffering, then that practice may not have as much potency, as much meaning as it could if you were to sit down to meditate, make sure the body is in the proper alignment, set an intention at the beginning of your practice, perhaps presence or awareness or compassion, and then keeping that intention in the front of your mind as long as you need to until the mind quiets down, and then coming into a practice of surrender through love, surrender through your own inherent goodness, surrender because you know that your heart is longing for this ultimate connection with the divine. And so that quality that we bring forward, that is actually what defines our practice for us. And so you could say, well, I don't like to meditate, so I guess that means that that's not the practice for me. Not necessarily. Just because you don't like something, it could be the ego. And then what you need to do is work on alleviating the burden and the impact of the ego in order to find the simple joy and the intentionality of the practice. So sometimes that means that we need to sit with discomfort. And as we're sitting with discomfort, we can sit in a few ways. We can sit with dissatisfaction and irritation, or we can sit with curiosity about what that dislike, what that discomfort is actually all about. And we can learn a little something about our tendencies by sitting with what is uncomfortable and allowing it to migrate, to transform, and to evolve into something else. So there's lots of insights that we can acquire by sitting with what is uncomfortable, rather than just making, the bold assessment that, well, because I don't like it, I guess it isn't the practice for me. Many people don't like going to church or temple. Many people don't like doing, rituals, but they still do them. And so some of the people who continue to do them will do them with a sense of dissatisfaction, and that will actually steal from them the opportunity to bring more power to the heart and less power to the ego. So, for example, if you come to a practice and you're uncomfortable, and you're taking that opportunity to sit with the discomfort, and rather than focusing on the fact that, hey, you know what, I really don't like this, I can't wait to get up and get out of here, or I'm going to take a nap and wake me up when the service is over. If instead we sit there and we look and we say, you know what, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but what is more important is that my heart is longing for connection. What my ego wants or doesn't want in this moment is nowhere near as important, and is actually not important in comparison to what my heart is longing for. And so by sitting with that uncomfortability, we find that we actually empower ourselves to become more resilient people. We empower ourselves to experience an inherent resiliency, a strength, a groundedness, a sense of presence, which can build upon itself so amazingly. It can build upon itself. So we want to make sure that we're approaching our practice, whatever that practice might be, with intention. And even if there's discomfort, that we're looking at the discomfort, and rather than just kind of complaining and staying in a place of being stuck, that we're opening ourselves up to the possibility of growth and expansion through devotion. So this is where Patanjali's Sutra 2.1 comes in, where he says that these three, discipline, self-study, and devotion, they are so important because they are a practice in and of themselves, but they are also key components to any practice. So they're both the path and they are the goal, and they are also the preparation. So if we come into this and we say, discipline, what is discipline? It means I'm going to make myself sit down for an hour every day and I'm going to meditate whether I want to or not. And yes, that can definitely be a discipline. And if you are a serious spiritual practitioner, then you have a good dose of discipline that causes you to repeat your practice on a regular basis over a long period of time with little to no interruption and with some amazing enthusiasm. But we want to be mindful that the discipline doesn't become cold and hard discipline that is actually harmful to us. We want to make sure that our discipline is mindful, that it is a slow, kind of a compassionate discipline that sets our feet on the ground, that stabilizes us, that calls us back to center, but then that also allows our heart to open up to a greater love, a greater unity, and a greater sense of intention. So if we just have discipline that is militant, that forces, then we're going to miss out on the growth, because we'll be too concerned with falling off the wagon of discipline and less concerned with the absolute experience of presence. All we really need to do is say to ourselves, I'm not going to give in to my ego. I'm just not going to give in to my ego. If my ego says to me, today is not the day, I do not wish to sit, I'll do it tomorrow, then we can look at that and we can actually learn from that tendency. Well, why don't I want to sit? What is it that I'm not willing to face in this moment? What is it that I'm trying to avoid? If it's that I'm trying to avoid boredom, why do I feel like I'm bored? Why do I feel like I'm going to be bored in this process? What am I not embracing? Is it possible for me to look at this a different way? And so on some level, discipline also includes the inquiry, and the inquiry is what leads us to the self-study. So the second component of this beautiful Sutra 2.1 is that there needs to be self-study. We need to constantly be looking in the mirror and asking ourselves, why am I doing this? What am I expecting here? What am I attached to? What am I not attached to? Is this truly a healthy form of non-attachment, or am I just avoiding? What's really going on with me? What is the foundation of this? And then let me take what I find through this beautiful self-study and bring it to my scripture. Whether that scripture is the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, whatever it happens to be that I am studying, let me look at what that tells me about my own potential and see if what I'm discovering about myself is somehow in line or out of alignment with that. And then that provides us with a path. It provides us with a path to move forward. So, for example, if I'm sitting and I'm finding that I'm weeping a lot, and maybe I've suffered some recent losses, maybe not. Maybe I just tend to cry a lot. In my meditation, as these tears are coming down, I might go to the Bhagavad Gita or one of the other scriptures that I use and take a look at the role of emotions and how emotions can either prompt or stifle spiritual growth. So tears can be really healthy. We understand that tears are a major way of releasing excess cortisol from the body. And cortisol is a very harmful hormone, especially for women, and especially for middle-aged women. When we acquire too much cortisol in the body, which is called the stress hormone, then we're putting ourselves at elevated risk for things like heart disease. So tears actually have a physiological function of cleansing the body, and especially, at least in this conversation, of something as dangerous as cortisol. So crying is not a bad thing. It serves a physiological purpose. Additionally, when we're psychologically challenged, if we've lost a loved one or if we've gone through some type of trauma, if we have a deep level of confusion, tears can also be a way of processing that information so that it doesn't stay stuck in the tissues of our body. And then through tears, through an appropriate amount of crying, we come into a place where we feel a bit fatigued, a bit tired, but we also feel like we're ready for rest. We're ready for rest. We're ready for rejuvenation. We're ready. We're ready to grow and to still concern ourselves in a healthy way with whatever the loss was, but to also recognize growth. So tears can be that for us. They can be a cleansing. Of course they can. Tears can also be completely unhealthy. If our emotional state brings us to a place where we're always crying, and for what might appear to be no reason at all, then we might want to look at the instability of our emotions and ask ourselves what's going on. What are we not addressing? What is it that really kind of needs our awareness and our attention right now, as well as our compassion, so that we can grow beyond that place of instability? So emotions are something that are really, there's something important for us to look at, and they can be a powerful proponent or opponent to our spiritual growth, depending upon how we are experiencing them, how they're coming forward, and how we understand them to be. If we feel that we're a victim to our emotions, then our spiritual growth is going to be a bit hindered by that. And maybe there's something in the scripture that you study that suggests to you how to deal with your emotions. So you can go to your scripture, you can study yourself, know what your tendencies are, and then go to your book of choice, to your scripture of choice, and find out what it could possibly mean, how you might be able to maneuver, work through, deal with it, evolve it, and how to not judge it in a way that leaves yourself lacking. Sometimes we look and we say, well, I guess I'm just an emotional wreck. Well, no, actually, all people are emotionally wrecked in some way, shape, or form. So it doesn't really serve a purpose to say that about ourselves. It's a very harmful statement. Instead, we can look and say, there's something out of balance that I need to address. So let me see if I can discover what that is. And with this beautiful guidance of this, sacred writing that I'm looking at, that I'm studying in this life, let me find out who I have the potential to be and how recognition of this emotion and this imbalance can lead me in that direction. So hopefully that kind of made sense. So the first thing we have is discipline, and we don't want the discipline to be just kind of cold, hard discipline. We want the discipline to be an interactive discipline that understands that we change moment to moment and that we need to address what we encounter to some degree. And then, in the correct moment, we also just need to sit. We just need to sit and move beyond what the ego wants, what the ego desires, and move into the space of the heart. And we need to take a look at ourselves and what our tendencies are to see how we might be hindering our own growth or prompting our own growth. Exactly what is it that we are, our behavior, what is it that our behavior is prompting us to? What is it that our behavior is compelling in our tendencies, our habits, our thoughts, our interactions? And then look at that in relationship to the scripture that you study and see where the disharmony is. And then work to reharmonize. And the reharmonization in regard to this particular Yoga Sutra is through devotion to God. It's called Ishvara Pranidhana. And Ishvara is a name of God, and Pranidhana is surrender, or devotion. So we take this part of this practice, this part of this sutra, and we say, well, the more devoted that I become, and that's my devotion, not anyone else's. So I'm not going to go around and tell every single person that I meet, hey, I know how to fix you, be more devoted. No. We don't do conversion. We do life. We commit to our own aliveness, and through that discovery of devotion and surrender within ourselves, then maybe other people are inspired to find the same. Maybe they ask a few questions, and if they do, then by all means answer the questions. But we don't take this path for the sake of converting others. We take this path so that we might walk less harmfully through this world with more intention, with a deeper sense of brotherhood and sisterhood and community, with a deeper sense of service, and with a more intense sense of relationship to God or Goddess. So the Ishvara Pranidhana is saying, I can do all this amazing work. I can sit here and I can look at my tendencies and I can try to harmonize my life, my behaviors, my thoughts with, the Vedas, with the Bhagavad Gita, with whichever scripture. But in the end, I need to also surrender to the understanding that I really don't control anything except for my responses and my reactions. And in the end, it's really the will of the universe, of the divine, of the source. I can't stop the storm. I can't change the world. I cannot end, the wars that are happening. But what I can do is I can stand firmly on my own 2 feet and in the sense of devotion, surrender all of myself to the divine and to the goodness that the divine represents in its flow, in its action, in its presence. And so what that might look like is that instead of becoming overly victimized, I might instead come into service, come into a deep service. If I see that there's a lot of tension in my community, instead of contributing to that intention, I might walk into the situation in a way that consolidates and brings about a sense of solidarity and invites people to join into the solution rather than contribute to the problem. And so we surrender. We understand that everything in life has a purpose to it, even the things that are uncomfortable and even the things that are, a bit horrible. War, for example, gives each and every one of us the opportunity to step up into a state of peacefulness and to support those that have suffered in wartime. So it's not to say that war is right or war is wrong. War just is the result of poor human behavior and greed and these other tendencies that we are working to alleviate within ourselves so that we might experience a greater sense of happiness and peace in ourselves. And then we can look out into the world and we can recognize that the war that is happening inside of us is actually the same war that is happening in different places throughout the world at any point in time. And that this is really just kind of a tidal wave effect, that the small disturbance within me leads to the tidal wave-like disturbance in the world, And so if more of us recognize that we have our finger on the pulse of some of the happenings in the world, then maybe if we take it upon ourselves to adopt a more peaceful approach to life, a more unified approach to life, a place or a way of being that is not as greedy, not as violent, then maybe that will start a tidal wave of sorts too. Or maybe it will bring the tidal wave to its resting point where it becomes a calm ocean instead of a torrential storm. So these three aspects of practice, according to Patanjali, we have discipline, tapas, we have self-study, svadhyaya, and we have God devotion or devotion to goddess, Ishvara pranidhana. And so these are the path. These are absolutely the path. These are also the practice and the outcome of the practice. The more that you practice discipline, the easier discipline becomes. And then you recognize its utility. You recognize that it's necessary, that the ego is so loud and so obnoxious most times when it's not balanced, that there has to be discipline in order to counter that. Just like there has to be discipline to keep coming back to your mat or to your seat at church or in temple or your prayer or your mantra, there has to be discipline to keep coming back to that, to give it the opportunity to reveal to you the potential that it actually holds. If you pray once, you're going to get maybe a little benefit. If you pray 10 times, you get a little benefit. You pray 10,000 times, you're going to get a lot of benefit. But to be able to repeat a prayer 10,000 times requires you to have a certain kind of stamina that requires a foundation of discipline. So if you're not giving your practice the opportunity to actually reveal to you its own sacred mystery and its own sacred gift, then you are lacking discipline. You're lacking the discipline to come back consistently and give it an opportunity to work. When we lack discipline, there's a really good possibility that we are also lacking a sense of faith and a sense of hope. So I like to use those two things in separate sentences because to me, faith is an understanding. It's a knowing of the power of Source and that in all moments we're actually okay, even if we try to tell ourselves we're not. That in the end of it all, everything has purpose and meaning to our growth and to our empowerment. Whereas hope is kind of like when I'm feeling doubtful of that, when I'm doubting that everything has meaning, when I'm doubting that everything is really for my better good, then I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping actually that the other statement is more correct. And I'm hoping that someday I will find my empowerment. So hope is not always based in faith. It's based in kind of looking at opposites and wishing for the better of the two or the more beneficial of the two. So we have this faith and we have this hope. that we're going to become, better people through these practices. And the faith comes through discipline. The discipline causes us to sit and sit repeatedly, to show up and to show up repeatedly. And in that process of showing up, we find out what the actual benefits are of our practice. And those actual benefits then being experienced within our body and within our mind lead us into a faith that we are correct in our practice. But that takes repetition. It takes coming back to the mat over and over and over and over again so that our cellular intelligence can be rebuilt, redeveloped, enhanced, and restored. And that any ignorance that may have been stored in our cellular intelligence is released, is diminished, and eventually evolved into this higher state of understanding. So we have the discipline, the swadhyaya, the self-study, and I want to know myself in this life. I want to know how I relate to me. I want to know how I relate to my body, my mind, my spirit. I want to know why I behave the way I behave. I want to know when I interact with you, where it is that I disappear to or how it is that I show up. I want to know why I have the triggers that I have and what those triggers have the potential of causing me to do if I let them run amok, if I let them run out of control. And so I don't ever want to blame you. I don't ever want to blame you or anyone else for my own behaviors. I want to understand what I'm handling in my own life and what I'm denying in my own life and how that is feeding into my behaviors. I want to know if I am a good person in any given moment or if I am not a good person in any given moment. And maybe even more, or in addition to that, I want to know that I have the strength to change. I want to know that I have the ability to make the commitment to change myself for the better, that I don't have to live this life in a state of deep, deep suffering. And that when I look at my behaviors, I can recognize not only the ones that need to change, but the ones that are fantastic as they are and can stay the same or grow even more. I want to connect with my inner strength, my resiliency, my heart, my love, my compassion. And I want to recognize that those are there because they are foundational to my spiritual awakening and to my spiritual upliftedness, just like they are central to yours. So this swadhyaya, and the swadhyaya, the more discipline that we have that is of a compassionate nature, the deeper our faith becomes, the more willing we are to look in the mirror. Sometimes we don't get along with people. We call it personality conflict. But what we should call it is the mirror syndrome. I'm looking at you and I'm seeing myself. And whatever it is that I'm seeing, I am not comfortable with. And so I'm going to go into a state of denial, or a state of judgment, or a state of fight or flight. Rarely does it bring anyone to a state of comfort to look in a mirror that shows us the rawness of ourself. The only time that brings a person comfort is when they are well situated on their spiritual path and within their spiritual practice so that they actually understand what they're looking at. It's called yoga psychology. It's the psychology of being and the psychology of growing. It's about the psychology of being hidden to oneself and then being revealed. It's a beautiful way to live life. It's bringing us closer and closer to reality instead of further and further away from it. It's actually a stunning and a rewarding way to live. So these amazing parts or segments of our yoga practice are actually really intertwined with each other. If you practice one, it will inevitably, on some level of your intelligence, bring you to the next one, which will reveal for you the next. So the discipline will reveal the self, which will reveal the devotion, because the inherent longing of everyone's heart is to fall madly in love. It is just to fall madly in love. To fall madly in love with what? The good-looking guy or girl next door? No, with the universe, with all that is. To fall madly in love with that and to be so at ease with that you feel the oneness, you feel the unity, you feel that you are part of something that is so much bigger than you. And then there is very little fear there. So you are open to inviting all others to join in that with you. And that allows us to walk through this life in greater solidarity, committing less harm and investing more heavily in health and wellness. But, we do see a lot of the opposite in the world today. We see people being stripped of their rights. We see women being stripped of their rights. We see people going hungry, no medical insurance, no dental insurance. Education is prohibitive with the amount that it costs nowadays for a lot of people, which means that there's going to be a larger segment of society in the future that's not going to be able to receive the benefits of a well-structured education. These things are so incorrect in spirituality. Healthcare, education, nutrition, clean water, clean air. These things, laughter, love, they should be available to everyone, not through some idea of affordability, but availability. They should just be here for us. We should be able to see a doctor if we need to see a doctor. We should be able to have an education simply because we're part of a society, and that society as a whole is going to benefit if we are educated not only in the ways of economics and mathematics, but in the ways of the human heart and in the psychology of the soul and in the unity of the source of the divinity. If we're educated in these things according to our basic, fundamental, foundational religious beliefs, then the only place that will bring us is together. We will not be divided the way that we are in the world today by politics, by economics, and by certain aspects of a flawed religion. Instead, we will come together under a banner of true religion and true spirituality, which only seeks to unite. It never seeks to divide. So some amazing insights, A couple of the things that I would invite you to think about this week would include, where in your life does your behavior need to change? And don't include anyone else in this assessment of yourself. Don't say, well, if so-and-so would change, then I would really be able to change. But because they won't change, I can't. That's an excuse. Straight out, it's an excuse. The only person in your life who needs to change is you. That's it. Other people, you can't control what they're going to do. You can't make their decisions with them, so stop trying. Every time we try to invest in fixing someone else, it means that we're ignoring ourselves. We're ignoring the work that we need to do. And we need to show up in this life and do our own work. So this week, take some time, pay attention to your behaviors, pay attention to your tendencies, and make note, keep a journal, make notes when you're quick to anger, what is the trigger? When you become doubtful and hopeless, what is the trigger? What is the condition of your faith? And where is your faith leading you to? Is it leading you deeper into a sense of unity, or is it leading you into a sense of judgmental separation where you have a difficult time accepting other people just because they think differently than you or believe differently than you? And then start to make small changes if you're open to it. And I really hope you are, because this world really needs you to be open to making small changes that are going to benefit yourself, your worldview, your health, your wellness. It's going to reduce your stress and your tension, and it's going to open you up to a different level of joy just through the act of witnessing other people. Have you ever watched someone pray? Have you ever watched a couple or a parent and child hug at the airport? Have you ever witnessed love? Have you ever witnessed sorrow? Have you seen someone crying and really watched as they received this sorrow in their life and were holding it in a space that was either tense or open, and how that really affected them? Have you allowed yourself to come into a deep, deep compassion for the sorrow and the love of others? Have you watched as a witness without judging and held a space for them to walk their path? You see, so much of the pain in the world today is caused because we want people to be fixed. We want people to be happy, so we're comfortable. And we want people to make themselves available to us so that we can maneuver, manipulate, and mold them into being in a way that allows us to experience satisfaction. And satisfaction is a complete ego game. Satisfaction is a game of the ego. And what you can be guaranteed of is that the ego becomes satisfied in this moment. It will turn its back on that in the next moment and look for the next great adventure, the next great satisfaction. So we don't really want to seek satisfaction. What we want to look at is contentment. Am I content in this moment? And how can I be content in this moment? How can I make the decisions that I need to make with a mind that is content instead of a mind that is distracted and disturbed? If I make my decisions from a place of contentment, then my decisions are going to be more grounded and more mindful and more straightforward. So I want to share with you a little story that hopefully is going to kind of bring so many of these various concepts together. You know, spirituality is not always straightforward for our human mind, because our human minds are complicated as all heck. And so, you know, we try to look at all the different levels and layers of being, and we talk about how we are impacted spiritually on all those levels and in all those layers. And so the mother, Durga, she is the goddess of the universe in the Hindu tradition and in yoga. And she is the mother. She is the form of the divine feminine. In some traditions, she is the first physical form. So let's start by saying that the divine masculine and the divine feminine don't have a form. They're the energy of consciousness. They are the energy that moves through the universe. They are the energy of the rotation of the planets, the shining of the sun, the luminosity of the moon, the flow of life force, wherever that life force may flow to. And those masculine and feminine are not man and woman. They are qualities. The divine masculine is the quality of stability, the quality of logic, the quality of consciousness, and the feminine is the quality of expression and movement. And I'm going to get into those in a future show in some great depth. But just for today, for the purposes of the story of Durga, we'll say that the divine feminine is power, is power. It's the power of lightning. It's the power of thunder. The manifestation of the lightning and the thunder would be the masculine, the rumble that causes. But the power behind it is considered to be the divine feminine. So there was a time long, long ago. I'm going to talk a little bit for a moment about things we might call demons, which are really our inner tendencies toward harm. But there was a time long ago where there was an individual. His name was Mahishasura, and that means the one who looks like the buffalo. And he was a very greedy individual. And he was praying to Brahma, which is one form of the masculine god. And he prayed to him for a very long time. And he finally went up to him one day and he said, look, you know, I've been a really good devotee to you. I've been praying to you for a really long time. I'd like a gift in return for my prayer. And this is not uncommon, you know, in the Hindu tradition is to ask for what's called a boon, or to be given a boon, a gift, or a benefit for your spiritual practice, for your sadhana. So Brahma said, what would you like? And this being said, well, I'd like to be immortal. And Brahma said, well, nobody can be immortal, not even the gods. You know, once something comes into a physical form, it must pass away. So I cannot give you that. Ask for something else. So he thinks about it for a little while, and he says, okay, I know what I want. I want to live in a way that I am not susceptible to men, to poison, or to animal bites. So I cannot be killed by any man. I cannot be killed by poison, and I cannot be killed by the bite of an animal. So Brahma thinks about it, and he says, okay, fine, that sounds good. Here's your gift. As soon as he got the gift, Mahishasura started wreaking havoc in the world. He started taking, and pillaging, and causing so much pain and so much suffering. All the leaders of the world got together and approached Brahma together with Vishnu and Shiva. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are called the Trideva, the three different qualities of God: the creation, the maintenance, and the destruction. And all of the people of the world, the leaders of the world, got together and approached the Trideva and said, you got to fix this. This person, this demon, is walking through the world and just taking things. He's causing so much destruction, so much illness, so much pain, so much suffering. This is not good for the world. It's not good for the people. And Brahma caused this, so you better fix it now, because otherwise you're not practicing non-harming, which is one of the foundational tenets of spirituality in yoga, in Hinduism, in many traditions. So Brahma says, well, I can't do anything because I'm the masculine, and he can't be ended by any man, any poison, or any animal bite. Vishnu comes forward, and he doesn't have any thoughts or ideas. Finally, Shiva comes forward, and he says, I have a thought. Let's build a great yagna. A yagna is a fire ceremony. And we'll stand around the yagna, and we'll make some offerings into that fire. So they do this. They build a great fire. They stand in a circle around the fire, and they each have a mastery, a skill of some sort. And one at a time, as they're chanting to the divine, to source, they're offering their skill, their mastery into the fire. And as they offer this, they say swaha, 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 the word or the sound of devotion, of offering. Once they've all offered the best of themselves into this fire, the fire grows very big. And if you can kind of imagine it, it separates from itself. And from the center of the fire emerges a lion. And sitting on the back of the lion is the mother Durga. And she's sitting on the back of this lion. She's kind of, for those of you out there who know how, about horseback riding, she's sitting side saddle. So can you imagine sitting side on a lion, the fiercest animal in the forest? And she's sitting there with both legs to one side, no saddle, no reins. She's holding mudras in two of her 8 arms, and she has a series of weapons in her other arms. She's dressed in a beautiful deep red sari that has gold trim. She has the adornment of jewels in her hair, long black hair, and she's just stunning. She's radiant. She's just so full of light. And the lion steps out of the fire, carrying her very carefully upon his back. And she looks at all of these people and men, and she says, why have you called me? What do you need from me? They explain to her what happened, and they ask her to take care of it. Now, there's so much that can be said there. They went to the mother to address the issue of the suffering that was happening in the world. Now, as an individual who prays to the mother, I'm devoted to the form of the divine as the mother. To me, this touches my heart. As a mother myself, this touches my heart. Because the compassion of the mother, which is present in every human being, whether they are male or female, the compassion of the mother is necessary in the world in order to end suffering. So, coming back to the story now. So, she is the incarnation of Shakti, the incarnation of the Divine Mother, which in and of itself is formless. It's simply the power that runs through the universe. All she really had to do was just take her power back. She could have really just ended Mahishasura right there, but she didn't. Instead, she went up onto a hillside, and she disguised herself to be a cowherd girl, tending the cows. And she made it such that the assistant to Mahishasura would see her. And as he saw her, he was so struck by her radiance and her beauty that he ran back to Mahisha, and he said, since you've taken over the world, you have acquired almost everything. You have beautiful wives, you have palaces and jewels and gems, you have this power and that power. And I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but you don't have the most beautiful wife. There is this woman who is tending to the cows on a hillside, and she is just shining with a radiance that is beyond explanation. You and your life will certainly be lacking if you do not have her. Now, we can look at that and we can recognize in this particular statement, what is being shared with Mahishasura is that if he does not bow down to the power of love and the power of compassion, then his life is lacking. But that's not how he takes it. He takes it to mean that he must possess her, he must have her, he must go get her. So he sends his assistant off with a message. He says, go tell her she's to come here immediately and marry me. And if she doesn't, then I will kill her family and drag her back here by her hair and marry her anyway. And this individual goes off to deliver the message. Durga responds like this. She says, please deliver a message to your master. Tell him I mean no disrespect. But as a child, I made a vow that I would spend my life devoted only to unity and only to the divine. And the only way that I would ever marry someone is if they could defeat me in battle. So please go tell your master that he must come here and face me. And if he beats me in battle, I will marry him. And if he does not, I won't. Well, the assistant was a little upset with this. He didn't want to take this news back to Mahishasura, but he did. And the crux of this part of the story is that you have to show up and do your own work. You need to show up. You need to face the mother. You need to face the father. You need to acknowledge the errors of your way, that you haven't been the amazing human being that you were born to be, that you have in many ways turned back on yourself, and that in this moment of great humility, you will stand up, and you will reclaim yourself and your inherent goodness. This is not what Mahishasura heard. His ego heard, you're not giving me what I want. Send Madhu and Kaitab. Madhu and Kaitab were two of his top generals, and he sent them to destroy Durga. Now, this sounds all very exotic and grand and dramatic until you know what the words Madhu and Kaitab mean. Madhu means sweetness. Kaitab means bitterness. So this demon sends her sweetness and bitterness in order to try to destroy her intention. He sends her preferences. He sends her many, many generals, and many of those generals are the qualities that destroy us if we allow them to. He sends greed and confusion, pride and lethargy. He sends her 2 by 2, all these different qualities that cause us suffering. And she destroys them all. She destroys them all with the power of her intention, with the power of her being. She destroys them all. It comes a point in time where she says to the assistant, please go tell your master that he can send whatever he wants to, but he will not find resolution until he himself addresses me face to face, until he comes here to do his own work. Now, at this, Mahishasura sends a very special demon. He sends someone named Rakta Bija. The word Rakta means blood, and the word Bija means seed. And I like to look at this particular demon as Godzilla-like. So for those of you who have seen the movie Godzilla, you know he's just this towering, dinosaur-type monster who wreaks havoc Everywhere he steps, every time his foot touches the earth, there's an earthquake. Something tremendous and horrible happens. And Raktabija is like that, except this is what happens. When he's in battle and he is injured, if he bleeds, for every drop of blood that touches the ground, 10,000 more of him are born. Wow. Can you even imagine? In no time at all, his type, his quality, his behavior would overrun the world. And his behavior, his quality is hate, desire, harm, judgmentalism, discrimination, prejudice, lethargy. Well, Durga is battling with him, and he is injured. One drop of blood comes to the ground, and there's more of him. So she pulls forward from herself, because she is power, what are called the Dasha Mahavijja, the 10 wisdom goddesses. And the first one that comes out is Kali. And Kali is a very special goddess that we'll talk about at a future time, other than to say that she has a gift that she can open her mouth very, very wide and consume completely this demon. So Durga takes her sword and she takes off the head of this demon. Kali consumes him completely and ends him. We might look at that as a fantastical tale where good has victory over bad, light has victory over darkness. But what it is also telling us is that this Rakta Bija represents our desires. That for every desire we think we have conquered, 10,000 more come forward. We must be mindful. We must be present. We must be complete in our practice, disciplined. We must be studying ourselves, taking a look at our tendencies, and then adjusting, adapting, and accommodating, always for goodness, always for unity, always for love, compassion, and always for a sense of sweet purity, the kind of purity that brings about solidarity in our being and in our life. So this Rakta Bija, he represents our desires. And Durga illustrates for us in this story the understanding that we can bring our desires under control. We can. We just need to have clarity and focus in order to do so. So jumping ahead in the story, which I will go more deeply into in another show, a future show, we come to the end of this battle. And at this point in time, Mahishasura has no choice but to face Durga. He's the only one left, basically. So he goes to her and they face off. And eventually she ends him. She severs his head. She severs his ego, in other words. She ends his ego and brings him into a deep, deep humility. Now, why didn't she just end him to begin with? Why did she go through all of this dance? Compassion. You know, it's thought in, it's believed, it's understood in yoga, in Hinduism, that we come back here more than once, that this life is not the end of us, that our soul goes on eternally. And if you knew that your behavior in this life was going to contribute to your appearance in the next, wouldn't you invest in the inherent goodness? And wouldn't you want that for everyone else? And if you don't adhere to the idea of reincarnation, that's fine. Don't worry. You know, there's another example I can give you. If you knew that your behavior toward your child today was going to set them up for tomorrow, if you knew that your behavior at your job, with your boss, with your coworkers, was going to contribute to the environment that would be present next week, wouldn't you want to present yourself and your intentions in the greatest light possible so that tomorrow and next week showed up in a way that was empowering and filled with unity versus destructive and filled with sorrow. So we can look at it either way, as actual reincarnation of the soul, or as the way life is developed, one day after the next, one experience after the next. So through her compassion of hoping for him to come back in the best possible light, instead of as this destructive individual who really wreaked so much havoc on the world, but at some point she realized that it wasn't going to be in this round, and so in a moment of her choosing, she ended the situation. The thing that we can take away from this is that spirituality is a path. Spirituality is a path, and it is not an easy path. But that there's a lot of guidance out there for us if we are open to receiving the guidance. If we are open to reading our Bible, our Quran, our Vedas, our Bhagavad Gita, our sutras, if we are open to reading the certitudes, if we're open to looking at these beautiful, beautiful texts across the board, what we will find is that there is a path that has already been laid out for us, and the path, the practice, and the outcome are typically very, very closely related. Coming back to Patanjali Yoga Sutra 2.1, Swadhyaya, study of the self, married together with a compassionate discipline, which is called tapas, married together with devotion, surrender to the divine, to source, bring us into that place of practice, bring us into that place of goodness, bring us into that place of self-realization, and finally, bring us into that place of unity with each other, with God, with all that is. So this week, take some time to contemplate on your behaviors. Take some time to discern mindfully where you can put small little changes in place so that you become a kinder person, a gentler person, so that you empower your good self, your amazing self, and your wonderful self to lead the way in this life and beyond. So this is Sudha. Thank you so much for checking in with the spiritual journey today. I'm wishing you so many blessings of love, peace, light, and joy. And I know that together we can bring this world into a place of its potential goodness. Namaste.